Hi, Journeyers. I'm Tony Carnes, your host for A Journey Through NYC Religions Television. Welcome to The Journey. Today we have a very special treat because we have Dawn Eden Goldstein back with us. She's been with us several times and it's always a very interesting interview. Welcome to A Journey, Dawn.
Tony, it's wonderful to be back on the show. Thank you so much.
It's always a real delight. You've been hitting it out of the park with your books, and the current one is a wonderful combination of theology and devotional. Its title is The Sacred Heart, A Love for All Things, published by Loyola Press. It's just about the best thing I've seen on the subject. Speaking of, yes. The Sacred Heart plays a big role in your imagination and your writing, but I don't think you grew up with the Sacred Heart of Jesus on your wall, that you grew up much more secular, became a rock and roll journalist, then a writer, a reporter, an editor, a copy editor at a local newspaper. I'm not going to recount all the things that you've done, but along the way you became a Christian and then a Catholic. Can you recount a little bit about your own awareness of the Sacred Heart as you made this journey to where you're at now?
Well, thank you, Tony. As you were speaking, I was thinking about a saying of G.K. Chesterton's, where he describes how coming when he entered the Catholic Church, he found that the Catholic Church was so much bigger on the inside than on the outside. And so there is definitely the sense for me as a convert to Catholicism, as one who grew up Jewish, and then I was fairly secular, somewhat agnostic through my 20s, then became a Protestant when I was 31, and 5 years after that entered the Catholic Church. I actually even a bit more than 5 years. But anyway, what I've noticed myself with regard to my perceptions of the Sacred Heart is that the Sacred Heart is so much more to me now that I'm a Catholic than it was before I was a Catholic. I would say that just the imagery of the Sacred Heart is something that's very distinctively associated with the Catholic Church. There are Protestants who have a devotion to it, but in terms of where the devotion originated, it originated very much in the Catholic world. And it's really a devotion centered on the humanity of Jesus. And although it is often depicted in terms of a rather disembodied heart, my favorite pictures of it, and I think the ones that the church favors the most, are the ones like this image that's featured in my book, where you see it within its context as Jesus' heart. In fact, that's one of the things that makes this picture so special, this picture of the Sacred Heart by Pompeo Batoni, that's in the Gesù Church in Rome, is that you see it actually, as I write in the Sacred Heart, you see him offering his heart as though he were offering an engagement ring. It's a very evocative image. But yes, when you're not Catholic and you're not kind of in that world, it's just like, here's an icky, bleeding heart. Who would want to look at that, let alone make it an object of worship? So part of the kind of joy and excitement for me as a convert to Catholicism is that when I started to have that devotion to the Sacred Heart, I thought, wow, now I'm really Catholic. There's no going back now that I actually see beauty in this. And so for me, where I started to see beauty in the Sacred Heart was when I started to recognize it as just what it is, no more than no less. It's Jesus' love in his incarnate humanity. And it's the mystery of that love of Jesus, where it's God loving us with the human heart on a level that we can understand. It's not some kind of, misty, mushy, oh yeah, well, God who created all things and loves everything, yeah, just has this love, and I'm just looking at this sort of generalized love. When Tony, when you say I love you to a person, you're not saying I love all humanity and you just happen to be one of this great mass of 7 billion souls or whatever. You're saying you're looking someone in the eye and you're saying I love you. And that's what Jesus is doing in this Pompeo Batoni painting, and that's what he's doing for us when we have a devotion to the Sacred Heart. He's saying, yes, he does love all humanity, but he also loves you personally, loves me with a personal love, and that's what I wanted to share with the Sacred Heart.
I think your book connects quite closely with the previous work you've done on devotional to the saints as a way of healing your wounds. Am I right about that?
Yes.
You focus in on the Sacred Heart as a carrier of the sense of vulnerability. You talk a little bit about where this idea of vulnerability come from, meaning a wound or woundedness. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that because it seems such an emotional, powerful connection that you have here, that you see the Sacred Heart in emotional terms. So I was wondering, was that also part of your own healing?
I'm really glad that you saw that connection between my book, The Sacred Heart, A Love for All Times, and my one of my previous books, My Peace I Give You, Healing Sexual Wounds with the Help of the Saints. And it is a very strong connection because in many ways it was my research for My Peace I Give You on saints' devotion to Jesus, on their love of Jesus, and how Jesus he brought them healing after these saints had suffered different traumas. Uh, I I learned through that research certain things that I wanted to share. I felt like I had more to say after writing My Peace I Give You. When Loyola Press, which is a Jesuit publishing house, approached me asking if I would write a book on the Sacred Heart, because the Jesuits they've been given a specific um, mandate from the Pope. Uh, it was given hundreds of years ago and then renewed under Paul VI and subsequent popes. The Jesuits have been given a mandate to spread devotion to the Sacred Heart. So here's this Jesuit publisher, Loyola Press, saying, well, we don't even have a book on the Sacred Heart. We need to get going on this. So when they approached me, I was very happy because I saw here's a chance for me to say the things that I hadn't said or hadn't completed saying with My Peace I Give You. So the angle that I chose for this book, The Sacred Heart, is that I chose to talk about the Sacred Heart through the eyes of saints, because I feel like, you know, there are theological treatises on Sacred Heart devotion, and they're helpful for theologians. But if we are really interested in this devotion, we want to see how it's lived. And looking at how saints and other holy people lived that devotion can help make it real for us. So I have chapters, some on canonized saints, some on saints on the way to canonization, from St. John, St. Augustine, St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, to Julia Greeley, an African-American woman, former slave, who lived in the early 20th century in Denver, whose cause is up for canonization, and Father Pedro Rupe, who was the superior general of the Jesuits and who shepherded them during some fairly tumultuous times. Um, so as you said, with regard to vulnerability, something that I really seek to put across in the Sacred Heart is that we all have wounds, and the question is, what do we do with the wounds that we have? Like Mr. Rogers used to say, what do you do with the mad that you feel? Well, it's likewise with the sad, with the pain. Um, I met a woman who said that she loves playing, sorry, excuse me, she loves playing. That's interesting. She loves making the stations of the cross because she said it gives her a place. That's where the play word came in. It gives her a place to put her pain. And just as the stations of the cross are a place to put our pain that comes from our woundedness, our vulnerability, so too the Sacred Heart that endured all pains for us, that's a place for us to put our pain and to learn ways to be vulnerable that are healthy ways. Because if we're not vulnerable at all, if we build a stone wall around ourselves so that no one can get to us, we're still not going to be happy. It's not going to make us happier. So if we've been wounded, we need to learn authentic and safe ways to be vulnerable. And that begins with trusting the one person who will never do anything to us for our harm, but will only treat us for our good, which is God.
Let me just recap what the Stations of the Cross are. These are devotional spaces, points that lead up to Friday, Good Friday, the crucifixion, and the resurrection. How many stations are there typically?
Oh boy, as a theologian, I should know this. I think it's typically 14.
By the way, that's right, audience. We don't only have somebody that's a good writer and is very good at connecting with us. She can go deep because she's a theologian, a doctorate in theology,
Canon lawyer.
and a canon lawyer. So we're not just skating on the surface here. We're going deep. We're going deep into the vulnerability that Jesus shows on the cross toward us. And I always thought, and you brought it up right here, that when Jesus makes himself vulnerable, you could get hurt because he's making you to want to be vulnerable. And then when you're vulnerable, you start opening yourself up, maybe from rebuke from Jesus, maybe to relive an unpleasant experience. But, so I ask, can we feel safe with that? How does making ourselves vulnerable to Jesus and his wounds actually heal our wounds and not make the wounds, worse or make ourselves feel more terrible? How do we start with Jesus and feel safe to be vulnerable?
So, with the question of being safely vulnerable with Jesus, it has to do with appreciating Jesus as Lord, and if he's Lord of our lives, then he's Lord of our entire lives, including the times when we were hurt. Now, it's a journey that we go through to trust in Jesus, and this actually gets to a saint whom I have a chapter on in the Sacred Heart. After talking about Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque, who received the visions of the Sacred Heart that ultimately helped lead the church to establish the Feast of the Sacred Heart, uh, more than 200 years later, a Polish nun named Saint Faustina Kowalska also had visions. They also had to do with Jesus' heart, but these visions were centered on the divine mercy. And it seems that Saint Faustina, living in the early 20th century at a time when there were pogroms and communist persecution of people of all religions, and it was during the run up to the horrors of World War II. It seems that during that time, God wanted to impress upon human beings that His love remained with us, and that we should trust His him and trust his divine providence. So the key message of divine mercy is encapsulated in this phrase, Jesus, I trust in you. Now, how do we get to that place of trust? Well, meditating upon the Sacred Heart can help us in that, because with meditating upon the Sacred Heart and we see Jesus' wounds, we see that Jesus' wounds had a purpose. Their purpose was to redeem us. And God permitted this evil only for the greater good of redemption and saving us from our sins that separated us from Him. And so when we see that in Jesus, then we can start to see how our wounds can become a graced participation in Jesus' passion. Now, I'm not saying that that means that evil is in itself a good. Evil is not in itself a good. Pain, as pain is not good. But what I am saying is that Jesus, through his pain, has taken ownership of all the pain, all the suffering in the world, so that it's no longer meaningless. He's able to work good, a greater good from it.
Don, you say at the Stations of the Cross we're facing vulnerableness. But I'd like to go back to this conundrum, two conundrums. One, by making ourselves vulnerable, do we get more wounded? And second, if we feel that in making ourselves vulnerable, coming to Christ with that then we can forgive other people, how do we then go on to not only forgive ourselves, the wounded, or maybe we're the wounder? How do we forgive ourselves if we're the wounder? Or forgive somebody else that's a wounder?
Well, this is something I talk about a bit in the Sacred Heart. I talk about forgiveness at greater length in the book you mentioned, My Peace I Give You, Healing Sexual Wounds with the Help of the Saints. Part of the way that Jesus shows us forgiveness is the way in which he forgives. When he's being nailed to the cross, he has a dialogue with God, and he says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." Interestingly, he's not looking at the person as the person is putting the nail into his palm, and he's not looking the person in the eye and saying, "I forgive you." And that's a message saying that the heart of forgiveness is not reconciliation. It's not doing anything that would give the person permission to harm or in any way excuse them. The heart of forgiveness is wanting God's best for that person, whatever God's best is. God's best is hopefully that person come to repent and come to want to do God's will. But that's up to that person and God. All we can do, or all that we're asked to do, is to forgive from our heart.
What I mean is, as we make ourselves vulnerable, we say, "Here is our wound." We don't think he's going to wound us more, but we do face the question of how do you heal your wound and the wounder? That seems very difficult.
There's a whole area of Jesuit spirituality that I love that falls under the term discernment. And so, when it comes to issues such as at what point do we reconcile, at what point do we communicate with the person who harmed us, that kind of goes to that area of discernment. But before we can even get to discernment, we have to follow what the Lord is telling us in the Lord's Prayer, where we have to forgive those who trespassed against us. And the heart of that forgiveness is in commending that person to God. Now, as I said, if a person's actively abusive, if we have reason to think that, like if I have reason to think that I'm an occasion of sin for this person, where if I even try to reconcile with this person's just going to keep harming me, then actually the most loving thing I can do is not have relations with that abusive person, if I'm an occasion of sin, if they're going to keep harming me. Um, but but I can be confident that as long as I've commended that person to God and released resentment that I have against that person, that I've truly forgiven, even if I never reconcile with that person.
Pope Francis issued an encyclical called De Lexit News, which roughly means he loves us. In the encyclical, he talks about this devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and how it can affect our own life and the world around us. Well, journeyers, I hope this has been a thoughtful and healing conversation for you. We're glad you're with us. My name's Tony Carnes, your host for A Journey Through NYC Religions Television. Look forward. Take care. Journeyers, thank you for being with us at A Journey Through NYC Religions Television. This is Tony Carnes broadcasting from Rome, Italy. Thank you. My name is Tony Carnes. I'm from New York with A Journey Through NYC Religions.
Pope Francis also describes the church as a field hospital. The Pope describes the location of those ministers of healing. They proclaim the gospel on every street corner. They find new roads that are not right in front of the church doors. They descend themselves into their people's night, into the darkness, but without getting lost. The outward mission means actively searching for those who are often hidden from sight in the church and in the world. Homeless, imprisoned, hospitalized, persecuted, but also those in need of mercy, reconciliation, love, community, and so on. How does this field hospital offer healing? By proclaiming salvation in Jesus Christ, by preaching the good news of the kingdom, and by healing every kind of disease and wound. The church, which includes the clergy, the consecrated, the lay, are all called to go to the sick and attend to their physical and spiritual wounds.